I'm going to take a few minutes and go over the graded assignment that I posted earlier this week and go through the solutions with you. And by watching this video and actually doing the exercise, you'll get two benefits. First, by watching this video, it'll help you prepare for quiz 1, which I posted today. Today is being Friday, May 22nd. The other thing is that if you complete the graded assignment, you'll get some points for it. Okay, so the points will be towards your grade. And you can open and close the graded assignment as many times as you want. But if you don't do it by the end of the week, which is Sunday, then the graded assignment closes and you don't get any credit for it. Okay, so let me just run through the questions. The first question was, while the United States spends more than any other country in healthcare, it also has the best outcomes and healthiest population. And unfortunately, only half of that is true, which is that we do spend more than any other country by a considerable amount. But unfortunately, our outcomes and our quality is not among the best. In fact, there are studies that indicate that between 100,000 and 400,000 people die each year in U.S. healthcare due to medical errors. So that's a great problem, but it's also a great opportunity. So the second question is, the increase in healthcare costs in the United States averaged more than 6% from 1990 to 2010. And that's true. And that's true because it's been a steady, unabated increase in cost. And so there's something called the rule of 70, or sometimes called the rule of 72, which basically says that if you take a growth number or an interest rate, in this case 6, and you divide it into the number 70 or 72, that tells you how long things take to double. So this tells us that healthcare has been doubling every 12 years. It's not sustainable because today we're spending over 18% of our gross domestic product on healthcare costs, and that cannot be sustained. So that creates both a problem and an opportunity. Next question is, hospitals and physicians services account for 25% of healthcare costs. That's false. They actually account for just over 50% of the total healthcare cost budget. So if we're looking for where to start in terms of attacking healthcare costs, these are the two locations that have ample opportunity for improvement. So healthcare is the single largest expenditure in the U.S. federal budget, accounts for nearly $1 out of $5 spent in the U.S. economy. That's true. One cost driver for healthcare is that price insensitivity on the demand side encourages higher prices. And so that's true. So the question might be, why are we as consumers not sensitive to price? And basically it's because we don't actually see the bill and we don't actually pay the bill. And because for the vast majority of us, we go through our health insurers. And so we pay our premiums, and whether the bill arrives or not, we typically are not responsible for paying it. And so we're not typically as sensitive to price as we would be if we're coming out of pocket. So that is clearly an issue. And that insensitivity pricing really allows the people on the supply side to get higher margins. Areas with fewer health plans and larger consolidated hospital systems with little competition have the higher healthcare prices, is true. For comparable drugs, U.S. prices are 50% higher than other developed countries. U.S. also uses more expensive mix of drugs. This is also true. There are 3,000 registered healthcare lobbyists on Capitol Hill. That's 6 for every member of Congress. And unfortunately, that is also true as well. The healthcare and medical profession spends an inordinate amount of money lobbying Congress for favorable treatment, favorable laws. And we as consumers pay a big price for that. So let's look at the short question/answers. I'm going to take one of your colleagues who's done a really nice job on this practice exercise. I'm going to show you that the answer that she posted, and then I'll elaborate where needed. Okay, so and I'm showing you one of your colleagues' answers without identifying who it is, because I want you to recognize that that the material is there for you to answer these questions, and so that's what I'd like you to do. So identify at least 5 core cost drivers that are thought to be behind the steady increase in U.S. healthcare costs. So if you go back to the week 1 folder and the videos recordings that I did, you'll see that I talk about cost drivers behind U.S. healthcare costs. So here are some of the, certainly not all of them, but I think the list here is a good starting point, and one that we need to recognize is going on. So, so you can read through this on your own, but what I really want you to do is think about this and come up and get some of your own responses here if you haven't done so already. In your view, what are the major roles and responsibilities of the management accountant? So, nice answer is provided here. And as I've indicated throughout the semester, or the first couple of weeks of the semester, in my view, the biggest responsibility of the management accountant is to help organizations make better decisions. And we do that by understanding cost, providing cost information to management, putting a planning and control process in place, and other key elements that we'll cover throughout the semester. Next question, the difference between cost commitment and cost incurrence. And just as a heads up, this is going to be on the quiz 1, which is posted, and you can open and close it. But basically when we talk about, there's a curve that I showed in I think it's in the week 2 folder, but in any case, there's a curve of cost commitment, and we commit cost when we make major decisions, and that usually is well before when the costs are actually spent. So for example, if I decide to buy a new piece of equipment, then so I've made a commitment, and then I'm going to incur those costs. So the first cost I'm going to incur is when I pay for it, but then I'm going to incur all the other costs. I may need to hire somebody to work with the equipment. I have to pay the electricity. I need space. I may need insurance, and so forth and so on. And so what happens is that we make major decisions. We decide that we're going to get into a new line of business, or we're going to add a new wing to our hospital. Those decisions get made, but the costs don't come along for weeks, months, and sometimes years later. So we have to recognize that as we make major strategic decisions, it adds to our cost structure. Okay. So question 12, what are the 4 components of the Code of Ethics of the Management Accountant? So the acronym is CCIO, competence, confidentiality, integrity, and objectivity. So every profession has a code of ethics, and the professions have code of ethics so we know what to do when we have important decisions to make above and beyond the rule of law. So one of the things I always like to use as an example is that if you're, let's say, a physician or a nurse in an emergency room under Massachusetts law, if somebody comes in a life-threatening situation, you can't turn that person away. So you have to at least stabilize that person. But once you've stabilized that person, then the question becomes, the legal obligation has ended. So now the question is, what's your ethical responsibility? And so when it comes to managerial accounting, so we know that our legal responsibilities are to comply with the laws, the tax laws, to comply with generally accepted accounting principle rules, and other rules and regulations. But above and beyond that, we're often faced with ethical challenges. One of the challenges that we might be faced with is sometimes management put business plans together, and they'd like the numbers to look a certain way because maybe they want to win approval from the board of directors on expanding a business or investing in a new technology. So the question becomes, do we objectively and honestly analyze the data and let the numbers show what we believe they do, or are we persuaded to kind of manage the numbers a little bit so that management can make the numbers look better? And so these types of pressures often come into play. They're not legal issues, they're ethical and moral issues. And so so that's something that we have to deal with as in any profession. So the next question, really, we're going to deal with this more when we get to activity-based costing in week 3. But one thing that we know about costs is that we can break down costs into 3 elements. We can break them down to direct materials and direct labor, and then overhead or indirect costs. So direct material and direct labor, I can directly trace to a cost object. So if I'm building, for example, let's say I'm building a smartphone, okay, and I'm Apple or I'm Samsung, whatever. So the direct materials are the components that go into building that smartphone. The direct labor is the time somebody spends assembling the components and making the smartphone. But there's this other big chunk of cost, and that's called overhead. And so in healthcare, we see the same thing happening, right? So the example given here was a heart surgery, the direct cost being the surgeon, maybe a nurse is in there, and maybe a technician, etc. Whatever materials they may use in the surgery, but then a big chunk of the cost is overhead. And overhead, so I know that the cost of the physician, the cost of materials should be charged to the operation. The question is, how do I assign the overhead cost to that? And that becomes a very difficult problem for us to deal with, which we're going to start to talk about next week when we talk about activity-based costing and measuring cost right. Okay, so I just want to introduce the topic this week. You're not going to see this on quiz 1, but we will come back to this whole topic. Okay. So the next question is approaches and tools that might be considered by healthcare organizations to better manage costs. So there are lots of ideas here, and I want you to start thinking about these ideas in particular. So there's some articles that I found that we'll share in the upcoming weeks, and certainly, the lean approach to is a tool and a technique that we're going to look at in terms of how to improve our cost and simultaneously improve outcomes. So we're going to lower cost and improve outcomes through a process called lean. Lean basically says that there are 8 wastes in every organization, and those wastes need to be understood and attacked in a vigilant manner. So they're sometimes called non-value added. So we look at things from the customer's perspective, and we look at things that don't add value to the customer, that things like inventory, transportation, waiting time, and the like, all the things that we see in healthcare. So the question is, how do we reduce and ultimately eliminate those wastes? And so lean is a big part of that. We'll also talk about something called the balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard will help us to look at the major drivers of an organization's success. We're going to break it up into 4 quadrants. We're going to break it up into the financial aspect, the customer aspect, the learning and growth aspect, and the process improvement aspect. And we're going to look at what are the key components of those things that help us to sustain our organization, grow it, and make it better. So other things that we may think about in terms of improving cost, might be benchmarking, looking at how other organizations are doing in terms of managing their costs better. Might look at cost sharing with different organizations, pooling costs, and the like. So we'll continue this conversation throughout. And then how not to cut costs. So this article I asked you to read in week 2. There's a few ideas there which I like. One thing that we often see organizations do that we want to stay away from is this idea of across-the-board cuts. That is almost always an extremely unhealthy way to manage costs. Because what you're really saying is that I don't really know how to manage costs, so I'm just going to cut across the board. And unfortunately, what that results is that the expression, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because if I'm cutting something that is vital to my core competence or my growth and my success, it doesn't make sense, right? So I have to look for the things that don't add value, the waste in the operation, and attack those. And I need to nurture and grow the things that are actually adding value and improving my operations. Okay, so lean, I'm a big proponent of lean, and the more you can learn about lean, the stronger you're going to be as a future decision maker and manager. And lean, it can be used, it's used extensively in the quality improvement world, but in terms of helping an organization to make better decisions, to improve their outcomes, to improve their operations. Knowing about lean, knowing the tools of lean is going to be critical. So, okay, so I think that's those are the key things in terms of the practice quiz. So I'd like you to go through and answer that. If you answer the questions to the best of your ability, then you'll get all the points for the graded assignment / practice quiz. So there's really no reason not to do it. Okay, so and then when you're done with that, I've posted quiz 1. It's in a folder called quizzes, and you can open and close that. It will close on Tuesday, the 26th of May at 8 p.m. So you need to finish it before then. And if you have questions in the meantime, as always, you should feel free to email me, call me. Happy to talk to you on the phone, happy to answer your emails, happy to meet with you in a webcast. As I've said, and I will say throughout the semester, my primary role is to be here to help you achieve your educational outcomes this semester. So thank you. Hope you have a nice and safe long weekend, and I'll be talking with you soon.